back to another.
Go ahead, start.
All right, welcome back to another Geeks Vegas Lines fantasy football and sports betting breakdown podcast / video for week 4 of the 2019 football season. My name is Kevin Allen, aka the Fantasy Football Geek. I am your host with the most. I've got my man, the season-long GOAT himself, Season Long Sez.
Hello.
Man who is known best for his call of Lamar Jackson potentially being the number 1 scoring quarterback, or maybe number 2 for this season, as well as the DJ Shark call this offseason. What's up, Sez?
What's up, my man? Another week of NFL and another week of top 12 performance by my guy, DJ Shark.
DJ Shark, man. We got to keep an eye on him for this week, but we'll get to that. But what an amazing call in the preseason. Some of these calls were amazing in the preseason. I hope people listened to your season-long breakdowns in the draft. And joining us today, we have a special guest, John Alesia, aka Statsation, from the DFS Army Beat the Bookie handicapping and sports betting service. What's up, John? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. It's good to be on for the first time. I'm new to Beat the Bookie with the DFS Army. Just started last week. And I built this model years ago. I'm a Wall Street guy, foreign currency trading. Built a model in the NFL years ago for sports betting. And I got to showcase it last week over at Beat the Bookie, and it went 5-0. So a pretty successful start to the season.
Gotta love starting out 5-0. And John, you're being too humble. I know John for quite some time, and he is a master of beating games in general, be it sports betting or any sort of games of wagering. Be it betting on foreign currency movement as part of a.
John was definitely the guy on the college campus that was taking the numbers, wasn't he?
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. So the first quick story, like the first day of school, and my freshman year was 1991. First day, I'm handing out the betting slips for the pools.
You ran the NCAA pool, I'm sure.
I ran the NCAA pool. I ran the weekly NFL pools, and I scared everybody. They said, "Boy, the Italian kid from Brooklyn here in Pennsylvania." They were a little worried about me, but then by the time October rolled around, they all realized I wasn't such a bad guy.
Now you did let them think that anybody not paying up for their wagers.
Oh, trust me, yeah.
It's not about if you're the bad guy. It's if you can convince them bad guys.
That's it. As long as they respect you, it's better to be feared than loved.
That's right. Like that's the Tony Soprano doctrine.
Exactly.
But in all seriousness, John, a very serious sports bettor and literally 25 years of experience doing this stuff. And we're so happy to have you on the Beat the Bookie team. A couple other notes before we get started, and I'm excited to break down week 4, but DFS Army $1 million winner week 3. Don't see that every week. So for anybody who wants to check out the story of Bobby Wow and his incredible $1 million win on the FanDuel Sunday Million this past weekend, go to dfsarmy.com, and it is posted. The interview is posted under the NFL tab. You can also just click like if you're watching this video on the DFS Army YouTube channel, on like and subscribe, and kind of scroll back to the previous couple of videos where you'll see that interview. Incredible, where Bobby Wow tells us about how with 10 minutes to go in the games, while we were all going crazy in the DFS Army community Slack, he had to shut his phone down and prep for his evening job as a youth pastor. So wow,
the gambling pastor. It sounds like a new sitcom.
Listen, this is a game of skill. We don't consider it gambling. Keep that in mind.
But that, by the way, that was a great interview. I watched it. I actually listened to it. I didn't watch it. I listened to it while I was getting ready for work, and it was really entertaining radio. That was a good job you did.
I was blown away. What a great guy. Let's get right into it, Alan. Let's start us off with the first game of the week.
Okay, first game that I wanted to talk about was Cleveland going into Baltimore, and Baltimore getting the full touchdown. This is pretty interesting. I thought the line would be a little bit bigger. John, is the market still think Cleveland's like this a Hall of Fame team or something? Like, why is this only 7?
I think 7's actually probably a fair number. Now, the number I have with my power rankings is closer to 10 actually on this game. It's a possibility that the the public is still on Cleveland, but I think they jumped off pretty hard after week 1. They're not the type of team that people are going to keep on pounding, where they're going to give teams like the Patriots and Kansas City a break with a couple of stinkers. I think a team like Cleveland coming out in week 1 being so bad, and they really haven't looked that great. They didn't look great last week either. I don't think it's a matter of the public overplaying Cleveland though. Here, I think that's a number that they're going to get a fair amount of action on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this number, and again, I consider myself, maybe somewhere between the sharps and Joe Public. Like, I'm a public bettor that I'm learning more and more each year as I do this. And to me, this number stuck out as like Baltimore ran with Kansas City for most of that game, and I see this one as a hard, a max bet for Baltimore. I think Cleveland's like a 7-9 team at best. Geek, where's all the DFS goodies? Are you totally staying away from Baker Mayfield, or is this a good spot for him because the Ravens are going to score a lot of points?
Listen, there's a believable narrative out there, and it is believable. Okay, backed with evidence that Baker Mayfield really is. He has some flaws in his game that teams have figured out and are starting to exploit. And a big part of the flaws, he's got essentially what they call the happy feet. He just cannot seem to hang out in the pocket and throw with timing. He likes to be out scrambling around and kind of running to his left and throwing. And what he winds up creating are situations where he wasn't even being pressured, but creating pressure on himself. And so I just don't think that style of quarterbacking is going to pay a lot of dividends against this ferocious Ravens front seven and their pass rush. So I think the Browns are in a little bit of trouble in this game. And I think they're going to have a hard time running it up the middle with their kind of 2-down grind, 3-down grinder in Nick Chubb, who I like a lot, but it's a really tough matchup for him as well. So, I really don't like anything on the Cleveland side at all. They have no tight end right now. I don't like anything on that side at all. I do think that a lot of people are going to jump over to Mark Ingram after his sort of big game where he vultured all the tutties against KC last week, and he had a great game. Let's not discount it, but again, only 16 carries, 103 yards. So he just squeaked by, not a whole lot in the passing game, but 3 touchdowns. So there was a little bit of smoke and mirrors in that performance. I'm going back to Lamar Jackson and his pass catchers in this one while everybody goes to Ingram.
Well, okay, so Mark Andrews was the tight end 1 through the first couple weeks, and then a sore foot obviously affected his performance. Are you still on Mark Andrews in DFS?
We have to watch that. We have to watch that status. Obviously, he just did not play as much. I haven't seen the snap numbers yet. It's Tuesday as we record this. I haven't seen the snap numbers or how much Mark Andrews was out there last week, but clearly they were throwing to Hayden Hurst and some other guys. And there was a little bit of just, he was out there too. The reality was just, it was an off game for Lamar Jackson. He was thrown over his head. That's what you have to expect with a young quarterback that really overperformed the first couple of weeks in the passing game. And I like Hollywood Brown here too. I mean, it's the same situation. Just Lamar Jackson seemed to have an off game last week. I don't think this is an issue where we need to just not target these incredible weapons that showed really well the first couple of weeks for Baltimore.
Snap percentage for Mark Andrews for week 1 was 42%, 53% in week 2, and he stayed at 53% of snaps for week 3 as an FYI. All right, moving along. We're going to go right. Kansas City is on the road this week in Detroit. This is at 6.5. I can't, John, talk to me a little bit about Detroit. I can't figure them out. I hate the coaching. The offense has looked better than I thought it would. Is the public just going to say, oh, wow, Kansas City is less than a touchdown, I'm on them? Is that the sucker side?
It's probably going to be the sucker side. Here's the problem, and Detroit's done this to me for years. I think ever since Stafford's been there, they've been tough to figure out because we all think, or at least at one point, we all thought Stafford was going to be, maybe the top, that second tier of quarterback, and it just hasn't happened. But Kansas City, when I'm handicapping these games and I run through my numbers and I've got my model, a couple of things that have stood out, and I noticed this about 3-4 years ago, is quarterbacks. And that may sound obvious to some, but I'm a guy who kind of just looks at the numbers. But there are certain quarterbacks who just outperform the number. Obviously, the Tom Brady, Peyton Manning did it. And we're starting to see Mahomes be that guy. So I'm being very hesitant these days of when my model is showing Detroit in taking Detroit in a game that is against Kansas City. So I don't want to go against these upper echelon quarterbacks. And I think that's something when you're betting, you're not going to make money betting against the top quarterbacks. And it's just the top few. And I think Mahomes is now moving himself into that category.
So what you're saying is that, when all the spreadsheet guys say, oh, regress to the mean, it's like, no. Did you see who we're talking about here? Did you watch that this guy could be on the Mount Rushmore when it's all said and done?
Yeah, exactly. It's improved my handicapping quite a bit by just not going against Tom Brady in the last 4 years. I would consistently, because my model on the whole is going to find games that just look unattractive and the public usually doesn't really like. Games that, I had when I worked on Wall Street, an old boss of mine had said, the toughest bets are the ones that are usually the best. And yeah, going against, so I have that inclination to sort of go against the best teams, but I think you are going to lose quite a bit of money going against Patrick Mahomes in the future. So I would stay away. I think those situations are now either you like Kansas City in the game or you're not taking the game.
Yeah, and we'll do a weekly reminder, Geek, before we get to the breakdown of this game, that John, if you don't know, we saw an amazing preseason prop on Patrick Mahomes at 35.5 under/over passing touchdowns. Geek and I put $1,000 on that. We hammered that one at a -110. So we are at 9 touchdowns and counting here. Geek, break down this game from a DFS perspective. Start with the Lions first, because they intrigue me again. It's like, which receivers are good? Marvin Jones out of nowhere last week. Talk to me about all the skill players here.
I don't think it was out of nowhere. It was just a matter of time before Marvin Jones did his thing. But all right, the most interesting piece to me, and the thing I was watching closest last week, was my boy Kerryon, quote unquote, my wayward son Johnson, and the kind of usage that they were gonna give him in the game. Now, I do have to say. There were pros and cons. Now, the Eagles' defense, very good against running backs, but they gave Kerryon 20 touches. He only got 36 yards, got a reception, scored a touchdown along the way. But what I was looking at was, since they released C.J. Anderson, I wanted to understand, what's the deal with Kerryon compared to this other guy that they are using, Ty Johnson. But it seems like Kerryon got the full boat workload with Ty Johnson coming in for just a couple of snaps. So even though that matchup against the Eagles wasn't that interesting, this week, a week where it's very difficult to pinpoint wide receivers that running backs that we like, Kerryon Johnson is on the radar, at a kind of discounted rate against a much worse run defense that just got torched by Mark Ingram. So that's really exciting for me and an interesting situation. On the flip side, on the Chiefs side, I remain not super interested in their combo of running backs. If I had to, both of them are priced too high for my taste, to be quite honest. Now, coming back to the wide receiver position, we loved Kenny Golladay. This game is such a high projection. We really have to keep it.
Did you just say passing over the KC running backs?
I'm not interested in them for the salaries. I can't figure out which guy.
Not even Darrell Williams?
Well, is somebody out?
He had a great fantasy. Let's see. Last weekend, Damian Williams was out. Darwin Thompson just didn't give him any work.
Yeah, Damian Williams was out, and then
so Darrell Williams got a bulk. He had a really good fantasy day, and he was probably min priced on. If he's still min priced, I haven't checked the salaries.
He's not. He's $5K. He is priced like a regular running back. That's what I'm saying. He's not min priced. If he was, I'd be all over it. But he's not. He's $4,700 on DraftKings. I haven't checked FanDuel, but he's expensive enough to where he's priced like other running backs that are you'll get 20 plus touches from Kerryon Johnson in this game for about the same salary as you'd have to split between McCoy and Darrell Williams. So again, it's just not for me. The split is too extreme for my personal comfort zone for this type of salary, but I'm not saying they're unplayable. As far as the wide receivers go, KC side, we're learning, and we discussed this week, that not one of these guys. It's going to be probably a couple of them that have good games every single week. 2 of the 4 pass catchers for this team are pretty much always going to have a good game. I don't know how to predict which one it's going to be on a week-to-week basis. I will say that Darius Hayward-Slay is out most likely for the Lions this week. He came out of the game last week and really messed up my Aguilar fade because as soon as he came out, Aguilar just went in Aguilar beast mode. But he will probably be out. So we have no way. The matchup is great for every single one of their wide receivers. I don't know how to narrow it down. I'm just going to keep them to game stacks or kind of like get down with the cheaper ones. And as far as the wide receivers for Detroit, I think you go back to Galladay and Marvin Jones Jr., the same two that they seem to only ever want to throw to. I guess you could take a sniff at Danny Amendola. He did get a couple of looks last week as well, but he's not quite cheap enough. He's 3,900 on. He's only a DraftKings viable guy, and he could be interesting as a. I'm not sure I'd use him as a cash play so much as just a pay down in tournaments.
How about our guy Gronkinson?
Gronkinson, viable for sure this week. The Lions are going to be throwing. They're going to have to throw. They're going to have to play catch up. So, yeah, TJ, baby Gronk, Hawkinson.
I mean, everyone's going to be off him. He had 2 poor weeks in a row after that monster week. I mean, I just think he's one of those players. I mean, he's a rookie. He's a tight end. He's going to have blow-up weeks. I would love to use him when he's cheap and no one's on him.
When people in DFS Army chat start asking about should I drop Hawkinson for Will Dissly, the market has soured on Hawkinson. So that's maybe the time to jump back on.
And against KC, where they're going to have to score points. That was my thought.
I love it. Love that play.
Hey, you met our friends at Fantasy Draft. They are the only rake-free daily fantasy site in the biz. Has partnered with the Geek's favorite restaurant, Hooters, to bring you the largest guaranteed rake-free contest lineup in the history of daily fantasy sports, including the $1 million Hooters Kickoff, only on Fantasy Draft, are 100% of entry fees paid to the contestant winners. Sign up at fantasydraft.com today with promo code ARMY, that's ARMY, ARMY, and you'll get a 7-day free trial membership. Void where prohibited, must be 18 or older. I've been playing a little Fantasy Draft, man. They actually, I like the format.
There's nothing I don't like about Fantasy Draft right now. I mean, the contests are a little bit smaller, a little more winnable. They're having a ton of overlay right now as they're promoting their rake-free approach. And John, let me ask you a question. You're a big-time daily fantasy sports guy, literally one of the best in the world. We didn't even talk about that because we talked about your sports gambling, but John is part of essentially one of the best. He's one of the best daily fantasy guys out there with massive volume. Let me ask you a question. How much more money would you have today if you never paid any rake?
Yeah, I mean, it was in the millions in how much volume I did last year. So if you took away 10 to 15% of that, that I paid away in rake, yeah, it's a significant number.
So you're telling me that rake-free DFS, you'd be up hundreds of thousands more.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And isn't rake in sports gambling the thing that makes it so difficult to be profitable?
Absolutely. I mean, when you're looking at a sports bet, a typical NFL spread game against the spread, they're 50-50 coin flips unless you have some sort of an edge. Them putting that juice, what they call a juice or vig of a minus 110 on the game, makes you have to pick the games at close to 53% in order to get to break even and make a profit. So it becomes real difficult.
Because you were coming on today, I actually looked up the number. I wanted to impress you a little bit. It's 52.38% in order to break even.
Yeah, right, I have one final question for you, John, and this is because you're a master of games. Now, there are 2 casinos, okay? You've got the Bellagio and, the Tropicana next door. Now, we know the Tropicana, it's not that nice. But they're dealing their blackjack with just 2 decks, whereas next door at the Bellagio, they've got 7 or 8 decks. Now, with 2 decks, you kind of got like a 50-50 shot. The other one, it takes you down to like, I don't know, 40-60 or whatever, or even better. One casino, they want you in, so they're saying a tie is a push. It no longer goes to the dealer. But the Bellagio's got like a nicer girl with some hoodies, and she's giving you free drinks. The other place is a little more. Where are you going to do your gambling?
Listen, I'm all about finding the edge. That's it. If I'm doing this, if you are doing this, even professionally or as a hobby to try to make money, you have to go find the edge. The last thing I'm worried about is what the place looks like. I'll go play in someone's basement if I'm getting an advantage. So I could care less about what the waitresses look like.
So if you're here to make money, if you play this to make money or to have fun or whatever reason, play rake-free daily fantasy sports.
Totally
I
agree.
Stress it enough. I want to support the endeavor, not just because they support this pod, but because I think it's important for the DFS community. The ecosystem is so much better with this model if we can make it work. So please go and put your action over there and sign up at Fantasy Draft using promo code ARMY. Now let's continue.
Okay, we're gonna go lightning round on these next two. Oakland, they're going to visit Indianapolis. Indianapolis -7. This number looked interesting to me. I'm really interested to hear your breakdown of it. I know when the season opened, the market was definitely undervaluing Indy. They thought the Andrew Luck retirement was a death sentence. Talk to me a little bit. Is that balanced out a little bit, John?
I think it has balanced out. I think you're right. I think there was a little bit of an overreaction initially on the Andrew Luck news. Brissett is not a terrible quarterback. We're starting to see that now. As far as the numbers go, I actually have the Colts closer to a 10-point favorite in this game with a 41 total on my numbers. But that said, my numbers aren't always what the model's based on, and there's a high likelihood I will have Oakland just because of how poorly they've looked. The model most likely will have Oakland, but I'll have that on the Beat the Bookie site later on tonight or tomorrow morning.
All right, yeah, no, that's good analysis, and I'm always interested to hear what like the proprietary model says, to see, like, because I try to set the lines where I think they'll be. And
Smart.
and then I look at where they actually are, and then I let that number determine where I should be on which side. So, and I'm hardly a pro at that.
Just a quick note on that: make sure you do that, and I suggest everyone does that. Do it before you actually look at the line, because when you look at the line, it's going to sway your opinion. Yeah, totally.
Do you play season long fantasy, John?
I do. Yeah, quite a bit.
So what I sort of correlate that to is when I learn it, like I rank the players how I want, and because ADP spoils, like, oh, this guy becomes a 3rd round guy, this guy's an 8th round guy, it totally throws off my whole process. So I think that's a little similar. Geek, where's the DFS gold? Start on the Oakland side. I always like starting with the team that nobody likes. I know you're not a big fan of their skill players, but Tyrell Williams seems like a perfect wide receiver 3 every week.
Very nice play. There's a fascinating thing that happened this week on DraftKings, where they jacked up some salaries of some of the skill position players, both for the Raiders and even more so for the Colts, which we'll talk about in a second. But Tyrell's the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. His quarterback is not a NFL caliber quarterback. Carr is really, really bad, but it's enough. He's good enough to deliver the football to this guy. And the Colts, while they're generally ranked pretty well defensively, or at least they were last season. Overall, they're not a team that really completely scares you from a bus just got here. But you can hear that. But they're not a team that completely scares you from a fantasy points perspective, opposing fantasy points. So Tyrell is in play. There's not a whole lot else going on in the Raiders passing game that is going to get me excited. Zach Pascal caught a couple passes last week. Not super excited about him. At tight end, Darren Waller, very interesting, but also a jacked up price tag coming off a 14 target explosion. Waller has just been incredible. He's like the NFL's best kept secret right now. He's getting a ton of targets.
He's their only. Literally, that's their only offense. I mean, tight ends usually, they usually peak out around 100 targets. I mean, he could end. If you picked Antonio Brown in the 2nd round this year in July, you drafted in July, that was the right answer. I know you're dying right now. If you have Antonio Brown in your season long team, hopefully you've cut him, but he was going to get 200 targets.
Yeah, so those targets are going to Tyrell. But it's interesting. Last week now, I can excuse not throwing to Tyrell that much last week. He was getting coverage by Xavier Rhodes. So I expect Williams to bounce back here and have another high target game, and he'll do better. So I like Tyrell here. He's a little priced up on DraftKings, and I don't have a FanDuel screen open in front of me, so I can't see that, or I can't see fantasy draft pricing right now. But I do see he's a little priced up on DraftKings. More importantly, though, and again, I'm looking at DraftKings pricing right now. Don't have the FanDuel or fantasy draft numbers in front. I can only do one. But it's interesting for me that the salaries for the Colts wide receivers have exploded. I mean, T.Y. Hilton's questionable here. We don't know if he's going to play. He's hanging out where he normally is, but this is a spectacular matchup for him. But if he's out, they already jacked up the salary for Paris Campbell, for Zach Pascal, and I just find that interesting. That, Paris Campbell's at 4,900. He hasn't had a good game, not even one. Like, they just priced him up based on maybe Hilton's going to be hurt. And Zach Pascal, I mean, you really want to pay up for this guy. So it's a pretty odd salary situation in this game on the Colts side. Make it very difficult to actually play the game from a Colts perspective, outside of maybe some sniffs on Marlon Mack.
Yeah, no, I think that, I was going to suggest Paris Campbell. I think it's good to get on these guys before they have that big explosion week. All those rookies, they're priced up now. Marquise Brown and Hardman, but I thought getting on Paris Campbell early would be a good idea.
I have a feeling if I check FanDuel that his price will not have been jacked up over there, and that might be the spot to get that exposure. I'll do it right now as we continue.
One note on the sports betting side of this game: Oakland is actually taking about 90% to 10% of the money on this game.
Wow.
Which is a little odd. Yeah. And when you look at it, Indy's taking about 60-40 on the tickets. And if you see a small or the differential in ticket size to money being bet, that higher money bet number is generally sharper money. And the higher ticket volume is smaller bets, obviously. And that's generally the public. So, your inclination that Indy might be not laying enough points in this game, the public's probably going to jump on that, but it looks like the sharps are jumping on as soon as this game got to 7, the sharps probably started to hammer the 7. They want to get that touchdown with Oakland. So
yeah,
it's probably going to be a sharp bet on Oakland.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I don't think Oakland's is bad. I think Gruden's actually a good coach too.
For DFS standpoint, it might be a sloppy, low-scoring game, and it might be a useless game overall.
Just to bounce back in on what I was saying before, yeah, Campbell and Tyrell are significantly, relatively cheaper on FanDuel, with Tyrell coming in at $5,900 and Paris Campbell at $56, which is pretty much close to min salary for any player who's starting for any team. So yeah, big difference for some of the salaries in this game on FanDuel compared to DraftKings, and I'll be more interested in them on FanDuel.
The game of the week, Washington, actually, who doesn't look as bad as the results may say, going in to visit the rejuvenated, amazing, electric New York Giants with, I won't say Danny Dimes because I think it gives me the douche chills, that name, but I will call him Hall of Famer Daniel Jones, because as I was telling you in the preseason, Geek, everyone was shitting on this guy. He's a very, I think he can have like an Andy Dalton plus career. I think that he has mobility. He's a smart QB. QB wins are an important stat in the NFL, but in college, I don't put as much weight on it when you're not at a big time school. I liked what I saw. Yeah, sure. Was it a little reachy in the NFL draft? I mean, only if he's bad. Christian Ponder and those type of quarterbacks go early all the time. If you see someone, you like them, you get them. I like the Giants. Laying 3, they're a little buzzy right now. John, talk to me about how this number are people going to be on the Giants because they like what they saw last week?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it's about 60-40 on the Giants, and you would expect the Giants, especially after last night's game, the Giants are going to probably get even more of the action, especially from the public, unless this game moves to more than 3 points. But yeah, on Jones, when you look at a quarterback, right, so the quarterback's going to affect the line more than any other player. I think that's obvious. What's not as obvious is the fact that most other plays don't actually affect the line at all. But when you looked at a list of the quarterbacks going into this year and how they were going to move the point spread if they got hurt or they were benched, Eli Manning was actually going to affect the line in an inverse way. In other words, almost every starting quarterback, actually, you're going to have to knock points off of them if they were out. Eli Manning, you were going to add points to the Giants with him being out, which is amazing. I have not been an Eli Manning fan for quite some time. I thought
he hasn't been good in 7 years. Literally 7 years.
He's had probably one Hall of Fame season in his career, and he's going to be in the Hall of Fame because of 2 Super Bowls. And it's a topic for another day. But
I mean, we could debate this but I mean, he had 6-game runs that were good. But at his peak, he was what, the 8th best quarterback in the NFL?
I think probably at his peak. He was being run out of town in 2007. Before they went on the run to go. I believe it was a game in Buffalo that he looked absolutely atrocious. I'm going strictly off of 12-year-old memory here, and I think Minnesota, they come back the next week and win, and got them on a little bit of a roll. But yeah, he was ready to be run out of town. He looked awful. But anyway, yeah, Eli Manning was one of the few, maybe the only starting quarterback where the market was actually going to give the Giants a boost if he was out. Now the problem is no Barkley. Barkley is probably worth a point and a half. He's one of the few running backs who's actually worth something to the spread. Zeke a little bit, and Barkley certainly. Barkley probably worth more than anyone right now, just because of the backup. Gallman is not very good.
That was like with peak Adrian Peterson, right? He would move the line like a point or a.
Yeah, it's it's something to keep in mind. I hear it all the time when people they want to say that this wide receiver's out of the game. Very few wide receivers are going to move the line unless you get a situation where, like in Philly, where they lose all of their wide receivers. But just losing a wide receiver typically doesn't move lines. It's got to be a special player, and there's very few guys on defense. Guys like Khalil Mack, as you saw last night, why he might be one of those guys. But don't overestimate the value on the point spread on players unless it's the quarterback.
Yeah, it's funny because, and just the last thing on what John said there is that when they had the spread came out for the game last week, and then when Daniel Jones, a rookie QB, was named the starter, the line didn't move at all. So I thought that was funny.
And it actually went down. By the time the game went off, it was 5. That game was 6.5, and it went off at 5. That was one of my games last week, was the Giants. And there was a lot of sharp money pushing that game down from 6.5 to 5. So,
yeah. Geek, give me all the Wayne Gallman this week.
No. My angle with this one is, listen, the Giants have traditionally not been a team. I don't know the Daniel Jones Giants, right? But the Giants as a team have not been a team that have produced well from the running back position. As a matter of fact, I think that Barkley's production was really much more talent-based than the Giants scheme really producing points well for opposing running backs. Now, I don't know, again, the Daniel Jones version. I only know the shitty Eli Manning version of the team. So maybe something changes there. But the angle for me is just more throwing for this Giants offense. With no Barkley out there, there's going to be so many more passes available to these pass catchers. So, man, did they jack up Sterling Shepard this week? I get it. But you kind of have to eat some of that and get on Sterling here a little bit. I mean, he's coming off of a 9-target, 100-yard game. He just squeezed out value, got that touchdown in there. So beautiful game from Sterling Shepard. And literally that last yard pretty much helped, some people win some money this past week. And then the tight end, Evan Ingram, got to go back to that as well. And pretty much just expect more passing game work from this group of pass catchers for the Giants, as opposed to really kind of trusting them as a team to get the running game going with Elijah Penny and Wayne Gallman Jr. I mean, I guess it's worth a sniff, but I'm skeptical of the Giants producing a ton from the running back position. But tell me, is Wayne Gallman good? I mean, you're the scout.
I mean, are you talking to John? Or are you talking to myself?
I'm talking to you, Sez.
Oh yeah. Wayne Gallman's fine. He's more than just a guy. I hear him being called a Jag a lot. He's not bad. I mean, he's a decent NFL running back. He'll be one of those guys that'll be I hear a lot of talk like, oh, they're going to bring in somebody. Why would they bring in somebody if they already have somebody on their team? I mean, why not bring in that somebody before this to back him up? Wayne Gallman's going to be at least in the pilot's chair in a committee. So he's going to lead. He's a plus pass catcher. He'll be fine. I mean, anything from Barkley is a downgrade, but he's just as good as any other third-round running back you'd get that kind of just, plods away and is a plus pass catcher. I don't think it's that big of a deal. If anything, this is a boost for Daniel Jones. Lastly, I just want to ask you, because I hear a conspiracy theory going around. Do you think that they strategically benched Eli to avoid his career record going below 500 at this game? Because he is exactly at a 500 record. And had he had another loss, he'd have a below 500 record, and that could have affected his Hall of Fame critics, maybe. So
I just think that's silly. I think that's ridiculous.
What's silly is paying him $23 million for 2 games.
Too bad. What's silly for me is not getting rid of this guy in 2011. Like he has not been good. I've done this. I've had arguments with Giants beat writers. I've done this. I've ranted about this for years. Eli Manning sucks. He has sucked most of his career. That year where you say he was top 8, there was like 7 starters in the NFL that were injured. Brett Favre was out. Like if you look at the list of carnage at the QB position, it was one of those seasons where all of the name QBs were out. And so he crept up into like the top 8 or 9. I believe it was 2011. But beyond that, this guy has never been a top 10 guy. He's rarely been a top half of the league quarterback. And the Giants have suffered for so many years because this guy had a lucky run on some good defense and miracle catches on a couple of Super Bowl runs.
The fact that they held the Patriots, and that first Patriot team was one of the best offenses you'll ever see. They held them to like 17 points in that game. And everyone wants to give Eli the credit. I mean, if you told me they were going to hold them to 17 points, I mean, there was no way. Matter of fact, I know I wouldn't have believed it because I bet
You bet the opposite.
Patriots. Yeah, I had the Patriots in that game, so it cost me a little bit of money. But yeah, it's remarkable. The defense really won those 2 Super Bowls for them. And yeah, look, in the NFL, if the quarterback gets all the credit and all the blame, so 2 Super Bowls, but he has definitely set that franchise back a lot of years because of those 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah, we can go on and on about that. I have so much more, but maybe we'll circle that back. Hey, Washington. I mean, I had a lot of misses in my season-long analysis, and but rookie-wise, I think we were on point this year. Terry McLaurin was going in like the 3rd round of rookie drafts. We had him in the late 1st round, and it looks like our analysis of him being an elite route runner and just being a polished wide receiver, I didn't think it would happen this quickly. And again, we've had a lot of misses. This guy looks like the real deal for years to come.
Let me tell you something. McLaurin may be, it's possible. Again, it's only Tuesday. There's a good chance he's going to be the highest owned player on DraftKings and FanDuel this week across all formats and contests. So let's just make it clear. Number 1 wide receiver, incredible matchup. Janoris Jenkins is good and whatever for the Giants, but he just got torched by Mike Evans, and the way that the Redskins operate, they move their guys around a little bit, so he'll have a good game, or he certainly sets up for a good game. Everybody's going to be on the Redskins actually in this matchup because this Giants defense, really, as good as the offense looked last week, the defense continues to look very, very poor. So McLaurin going to be one of the more popular players. I think people will be on Paul Richardson. That feels a little like bad chalk to me. But what do you say, John? Bad chalk on Paul Richardson this week if people are jumping on that after that big game last night?
Yeah, my general rule when it comes to wide receivers is I don't like to be over the market on a top owned wide receiver. I'd rather be under the market on the top owned wide receivers in general, just because I think there's a little bit more volatility and there more has to happen for that top wide receiver to be the top guy, whereas the running back, as long as he gets the carries, they'll usually get there. So yeah, if Washington's going to be, if those wide receivers are going to be overbought this week, I'm going to be under the market on those guys.
Yeah. Were you under on Aguilar this past week?
I was. I'm generally going to be under on those guys. I was under on him. That didn't work out as well. I was under on. I was under on. I believe I was under on Allen as well, and that didn't work out. Of course, I was mentioning earlier I had the absolute nuts in the late stack with I had an Evans Allen with the Daniel Jones Giant stack. Unfortunately, I had Barkley in it, and cost me about $100,000 if Barkley actually plays. That it's an easily first place lineup in the late DraftKings. So that was painful.
It's brutal when the guy you paid the most for and seem like you have to worry the least about is the one that screws you. Of course, he got hurt, so we don't know. He could have had an incredible game. So whatever, in-game injuries happen, man. That's part of the deal, and it does not feel good when it happens.
Nope.
You just got to understand every time. That's one of those reasons why
it feels good when it happens to other people. I like when it happens to other people.
Well, what I'm saying is it's one of those reasons why even super chalk in the best spot ever is never completely safe in NFL. Aside from the high variance, it's also just people get hurt, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, that was an incredible play and it looked great, and then Gronk breaks his arm on the first play in the playoffs, and you're like, what the fuck just happened here? I was about to win all the monies, and I had the best tight end, and he breaks his arm in the first play. Like, those things happen, so it's always keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about like Aguilar. I loaded up in DFS on my guy JJ Arcega downside this week. I mean, it was really bad.
Oof.
So close at the end, though. So close. There was a 60-yard pass, and he
dropped it.
Yeah, he kind of dropped it. It hit his hands a little bit. So that sucked.
Ever since you were telling me about SuperDraft.io, I got involved, man. This is a cool little contest. Tell the people about it. And I would like to hear your experience if John's played it yet. SuperDraft.io.
Man, SuperDraft is a new daily fantasy sports operator that kind of brought a different idea to the table. Instead of doing salaries, they put multipliers on the players. So, like, if you want to get Christian McCaffrey or Zeke Elliott any given week, you're going to get a 1.0x multiplier. Whereas, like, a more volatile running back, let's say a Marlon Mack or or a Sony Michel type of guy, you'll probably get a 1.8 or a 2.0. And the same thing works for the wide receivers. So the beauty of the site is understanding the power of the multiplier and how in a tournament, for example, even if a player has a lower projection overall, if they're getting a 2.0x and you choose the right wide receiver, he goes off for 25 points. That's so much more valuable, a 50-pointer, than anything any other non-multiplied player can get. So it's a really cool format. And the greatest thing about them is right now they're really promoting it and sort of pouring a lot of money into the site to bring people in. So these contests have had a ton of overlay every single week. So there's been just tons and tons of free money in these things every single week. DFS Army members have been crushing it. John, have you played it?
I have not played it yet. I know you had mentioned it to me, so I'm going to have to actually go over on DFS Army and get a little bit better idea of the rules on that and start to look at it for the next couple of weeks before I jump in.
Well, don't miss out on the overlay, man. You got to just jump into that.
Yeah,
thing.
I saw you posting a bunch of that the overlay.
Yeah.
So whenever I hear overlay, I'm all about it.
That's all I'm about. So if anybody wants to go check that out, go to superdraft.io, use promo code ARMY, ARMY, and you get a $10 bonus when you make your initial deposit. Like I said, DFS Army's subs are going crazy on it, and we do have a projection system in place for DFS Army subscribers that kind of applies the multiplier to it. And we do that based off the NFL props and also our projections. So we have a couple of different methods for projecting for SuperDraft, and it's been really awesome. And using the projections really helps you mentally sort of envision some things, but you also have to be a little bit creative about picking players at high multipliers that have a chance to go off, especially if they're tied to the quarterback that you choose.
All right. Yeah, no, that sounds fun. I'm definitely going to try that out. Back to the slate, Tampa. After a very interesting game against the Giants, they're going to go and visit the Rams at home. Rams are a 9.5-point favorite. This is an interesting line. I crossed this game off because I just couldn't figure it out at first glance. John, talk to me about where your number is. Are the Rams, are they a good home team against the spread? I was curious about that.
Yeah, well, I know everyone's been talking about the Goff at home. I'd have to look specifically to the Rams at home. I don't know if there's any edge there. While you guys are talking on the DFS, I'll take a look at it. But my numbers have it pretty close to where it's at. I would have had this at 9.5 for the Rams and a 49 total. It actually looks like it might be up to 10 now, and the money's coming in on Tampa. Not sure if I anticipated that coming off a loss, but the cash is coming in on Tampa. Again, now that I look at it, the tickets are actually more on the Rams, which makes sense. So there's probably some sharp money coming in on Tampa. It's probably not a game that I'm going to have in the model when I'm just looking at it, right. But it looks like the sharp side of this game is probably going to be Tampa.
Yeah, this is a stay away game for me. There'll be some good fantasy implications here. I mean, Geek, last week we were both shocked that even though Mike Evans had a couple of bad weeks in week 1 and 2, that he all of a sudden was priced lower, meaning cheaper than Godwin. The chickens came back home to roost. Mike Evans had a mega throbber last week. I'm usually not one to chase wide receivers, like you said, but I think I'm on Mike Evans if the price is right.
Evans, matchup wise, not as great this week. He's going to see Aqib Talib, very elite corner. And we've seen Evans really get negated by elite cornerback play in the past. Bradbury from the Panthers comes to mind. So we can never fully assume who's going to shadow who. And that's one of the tricky things about just fantasy football in general, football prognostication. Like we might think that, they'll shadow Evans with Talib, but all of a sudden, it's like, no, we put him on Godwin and we double team it. They could do all kinds of things. And the Rams have been pretty good against the pass. So I'm not 100% sure I want to chase that. Definitely not a cash play for me. The other big, I kind of like to go back to Godwin. They've jacked up Evans' salary to $7K on DraftKings, and they left Godwin all the way down at $6K. So they have reversed it. And now Godwin becomes the more interesting of the two here. Last week, we obviously talked about Mike Evans on this show, and that was awesome. It worked out really well. On the Rams side, the same scenario is in play. That's in play for them every single week. There are 3 guys here. Last week, it was Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp seems to generally be the highest floor of the group. But all 3 of them really had great games last week, or at least Kupp and Brandon Cooks did.
Robert Woods did not. I was on him in fantasy, and he laid an egg.
Well, it's what I literally always say. You need two of the three, but good luck choosing which two. So, last week, I guess it was Woods who got the 8 targets, but just didn't do enough with them. That was the disappointment. I'm just looking at the numbers now. All three of them are bunched together in salary on most of the sites. And if I'm stacking up this game on the Ram side, that's all I'm doing. I'm going Goff plus 2 of these guys, and I'm going to mix and match who the 2 are because you never know which are the 2 that go off. But I do need 2 of them generally to go off for Goff to be the winning quarterback in tournaments that week. Like, one of them going off is just not enough. I need 2 at least. So I'm going to stack him with 2 of these guys. I'll have a comeback with somebody like Godwin. I don't like any of the running backs in this game. I just don't like the Tampa group, and not in this matchup. It's really bad. And, Gurley's really just untrustworthy at this point. Although he's probably going to break out at some point and have a good game. I mean, if you're ever going to do it, this is it. And he's been getting a lot of looks, but it's just not the Gurley of old that that we know and love.
And specifically because of the pass catching, he looks like a fine NFL running back. But Geek, we were saying it all best ball season. Do not draft Todd Gurley in the first round. Do not draft Todd Gurley in the second round. He belonged in that tier where like the Aaron Jones, Kerryon Johnson. If you wanted to take the risk there, we were okay with it. And it's just no surprise. I could not believe that he went back into the first round by the end of the draft season. He just did not belong there.
Just people getting fooled, by the way. And the other thing is, if they price Gurley on daily fantasy down alongside Marlon Mack and Kerryon Johnson, yeah, I'm interested. But he's still got a little studly pricing for me, a little name value. What do you say, John?
I'm early on in my research on this. I was looking at this in August for the season long fantasy. And if you take the guys who I'm looking at it like from a trends standpoint, from trading background, I was taking ADPs and going in the past and then looking at guys, the top level guys who have now dropped in ADP. You basically want to stay away from them. I think we've spoken about wisdom of the crowds and things like that. Mm-hmm. It's almost as if there's a certain portion of the market that realizes, hey, we need to start selling a guy like Gurley. And then there's another portion of the market who just really thinks, well, Gurley is going to be Gurley. And especially with the running backs, because once they hit that wall, they hit it. And unless your name's Adrian Peterson, you're usually done. Really, it's a little late now, but next year when you're starting to look at your year long, but again, DFS, we're early. When you're looking at it and you see these guys who start to be sold, and they're getting pushed from the first round last year, top 5 pick down to the end of the first round, and then early second round, stay away from them. I stayed away from Gurley. I stayed away from Brown for reasons, obviously. He would have been good, like you said, late second, but I wasn't taking him in the early second. There were guys out there that you could have stayed away from, especially these running backs.
And you said it exactly right. It's in the first and second round. There's other guys without the risk there.
Right.
And you just,
right.
Why do it? I just didn't get that at all. We got to get John in some of our fantasy leagues, man. I like what he's saying here. I like how, I like his competitive spirit and how he thinks about fantasy football.
I like winning some of these leagues, though.
No, trust me, you do well. As long as it's a head-to-head league, I have no chance. So I lose head-to-head no matter what I score. So you'll be fine.
We do it kind of cool and I won't bore people with our leagues, but how we do it, John, is we have our head-to-head, and then in a typical 12-person league, the top 6 scores and the bottom 6 scores, the top 6 get an extra win and the bottom 6 get an extra loss. So every week you either go 2-0, 1-1, or 0-2.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, so you're playing against the median as well, because nothing worse than losing to the guy with the top score and you have the second highest score.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yep. This line right here surprises me. John, why am I not putting a good amount of money on Jacksonville? I live in Jacksonville right now. I'm an ex-New Yorker, and it is like Gardner, Mishnu mania. Everyone here is walking around with a porn mustache.
Yeah. Is there a huge overreaction? Is it me, or is there just way too much of an overreaction here about a guy who hasn't done really much of anything other than that he's got a cool mustache? I'm looking at the numbers. I'm like, I don't know what the excitement is here. Denver's defense is not bad. I think Denver's a better team than people actually think. If you look at the money right now, 72% of it is on Jacksonville and 60% of the tickets. So yeah, I'm not shocked there. There's probably a lot of public money right now on the Jags, but it's actually juiced. And some of your listeners might not know what I say by juice, but when you get the games on these key numbers, like a 3 and a 7, a lot of times the books are going to juice a number
minus like 120
instead of moving it.
Is that what they do? They add like more vig to it?
They add more vig because they don't want to move off of the key number. And a game like this, what I'm seeing is Denver is actually juiced. So you actually have to lay more money on Denver right now at 3 than if you take Jacksonville, despite the fact that the money is coming in on Jacksonville. So that's always a little bit of a red flag. And we'll see how that plays out through the rest of the week.
Just explain that to me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Explain that to me because I didn't fully follow.
Okay.
So the number being juice, meaning it's not minus 110, it's what, minus 130?
It's like minus 120 right now, and it's going to vary based on the book. But when you're on these key numbers in the NFL, 3, 7, 10, those are your big key numbers. The books are going to be hesitant to move games off of those numbers. Reason being, games end on those numbers at a very high frequency, and if they move off of that game, they open themselves up to being what we call middled, where if the game now lands on 3 and they move this game to 3.5, they're going to lose on everyone who bet 3.5, and they're going to push. They're going to make nothing on the game. So what they'll do is try to keep it on the key number as long as possible, and then move the juice on that game.
Okay,
that's a really
signal though to bet the Denver side in this one a little bit, or that line is about to go to 3.5.
Yeah, what it's saying is if you like Jacksonville, I would hold off on the game and wait and see if you could possibly get 3.5. If I like Denver, I might take the 3, especially if you have 3 at minus 110 and I like Denver, I would probably just jump on the 3. It's a game that I'm not going to be playing, but it's something that we could probably talk about in the future is how to try to read line moves, because getting the right price on a game is almost as important, if not more important, than picking the right game. I believe if you could get yourself an extra point over where the game closes, you are automatically going to be a winner. If you added a point, just 1 point to every single game where it closed, you will pick close to you'll be over 53% on your picks.
Yeah, you'll be a long-term winner. Absolutely.
So just getting a better line than closes is hugely important.
John's going to hate this strategy because he's a sharp bettor. But what I would do in this case, and again, I'm going to preface this by saying this is the sucker move, is I would take Jacksonville right now and buy the half point or buy the half a point or buy the full point. Probably half a point in this sense. Pay the unnecessary juice just to lock it in, not knowing. Because this is a game where I just think Jacksonville can win the game outright. I would almost think about taking the money line here. And if I have that feeling, grabbing the extra half point with the extra little bit of juice, probably the sucker move, but it's something that I would do.
I like the money line play better than I would like the buying the half point. Yeah, I'd have to look at it, but yeah, the money line is probably a good play if you like Jacksonville.
Yes, correct. And so Geek. Philip Lindsay exploded last week. Are we finally getting back to normalcy? My guy, Philip Lindsay, is a DFS play in PPR leagues and half PPR. He's a running back that doesn't just need to catch the football. He runs tough between the tackles too. Tell me why I shouldn't be having Philip Lindsay in every single one of my lineups.
I mean, we're talking about a pretty good Jacksonville defense. So let's not go crazy with any sort of loading up on Denver here. But let me back it up. We did say last week that Philip Lindsay, when people started talking about Royce Freeman as, oh, he's the better guy, and he looked like, because he had a slightly better game last week, I was all over Philip Lindsay, and I mentioned that in my notes as well. Like when you hear that narrative, you got to go the other way. But I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about the legend, the growing legend. And I know, John, you said that, Minshew is getting a little overblown here, but I'm buying it, man. I love this guy. I love his look. I love his swagger. I love the whole thing, the legend. Every day I see another story about this guy, about some crazy thing he did, or some just like these legendary stories. One about how when he left the house for college, he turned to his father and he said, "You're the man of the house." Now, like just all these awesome little legends that keep popping up about Gardner Minshew. I am buying in, and I'm going to coin this right now. I hope nobody has said this yet, because I always get fucked over on coining things. But Gardner Minshew has a little bit of Broadway Joe Namath going on, not just in his personality and his swagger. I've never said this about any other quarterback before. I am a fan. I am buying into the legend. Now, all of that said...
Well, let me ask you a question. Hold on. If the Jets could poach one of these two quarterbacks, if they could take Minshew or if they could take Daniel Jones, which one would you rather have?
I'm on board with Gardner Minshew
Yeah, I'm taking
I don't
Jones.
know.
Right? I'm taking
I,
Jones.
like,
Right now.
I don't know. I don't know. I just like the stat, man.
John, should we smack him back into reality right now?
Here's the thing. I'm hoping the market just goes nuts here with Minshew. It's not going to be too overblown, but wherever the market is in DFS with Minshew, it's going to be too high.
Right.
They're going to do absolutely nothing on offense this week in Denver.
Quick tangent. Would you, John? I'm assuming you're a Giants fan.
No, I'm actually one of those New York Cowboy fans.
Okay, yeah, no, I know those guys, but I was just saying. And who do you think is going to have the better NFL career? And Geek, I want you to weigh in on this as well. Would you rather take Sam Darnold at this point or Daniel Jones?
Oh man, yeah, I've had this question a lot.
This is the most unfair question ever.
I haven't seen enough Jones.
No, you have to pick today.
But if I had to pick today,
you have to pick today, or you get Josh Rosen.
I'm taking Daniel Jones.
I'm sticking with Darnold, man. What? This is the most unfair question ever.
I know.
Recency bias is
and I'm not the guy who jumps on the recency bias. And I don't mind Darnold, but I think. Right. I think it's one of those. I think your upside's higher here with Jones, and I think your downside. I think he's got the lower floor and the higher ceiling, and I think Darnold is just going to be a solid starter for you for years to come.
Then let me ask the more fair question: Baker Mayfield or Daniel Jones? Who would you rather have moving forward if you're a franchise?
Yeah, these are tough questions. I'm not a huge Baker Mayfield guy either, so but I'm going to take Mayfield because I think he's got a little bit more track record.
Okay, then let's ask the real question: Patrick Mahomes or Daniel? No, I'm just kidding.
Enough.
Yeah,
that was a joke. Go ahead, Geek. Talk to me about who you playing on. Are you playing DJ Shark every week at this point?
No, it's not an every week. Listen, in my season-long league, I'm leaving him in, but I mean, you're at Denver this week, and John said it best: 38-point game total here. A road game for this Jackson. Two nasty defenses going at it. Denver plays much better defense at home than they do on the road. This Jaguars team, very good. I'd rather take my shots, quite honestly, on the Denver side if I had to do offensive players because they're the home team. I don't think that as much as the legend of Gardner Minshew is growing, this isn't like the spot where I want to get on it. I'm
going to go out on a limb and say there is no player from this game in any big GPP winners.
There we go, and I'm on board with that. I don't think this is the game that's going to. Maybe one of these defenses, but
defense maybe,
yeah. No, we could pass on this game.
All right, so Tennessee going to Atlanta. I'm starting to buy into the whole narrative. Atlanta, the home team, is good. Atlanta, the away team, I'm staying away from. This spread feels a little light. I like Atlanta a lot from a betting perspective. I think this is going to be one of my better bets of the week. Am I off base according to your numbers, John?
I'm going to wind up having Tennessee most likely because it's one of those games that it's actually right on the number. As far as my numbers, I would have had this game at 4. But I think coming off that game that Tennessee's coming off of, generally my model likes that sort of thing. And having looked at it briefly this morning, Tennessee's most likely going to be one of my plays because of that. I think I'm not that high on Atlanta, to be honest, as a really strong team. Obviously, as you said, you like them better at home. Matt Ryan's been much better when he plays in domes and certainly at home. But this is a spot. I think Tennessee is a better team than people give them credit for. When the game gets away from them, like it did early last week, they had between the refs and the turnover early, they will not come back. Right, so they're not going to come from behind. But in a situation, if they could get a lead and just grind the ball out and play really solid defense, the 4, I don't mind the 4 and seeing this being a field goal type of game.
Yeah, that's interesting. You could see that this being like in the muck sort of game. And, you talked about Tennessee's running game. The Geek knows that Derrick Henry, one of our favorite players on this podcast, we interviewed Derrick Henry's high school coach on this podcast not too long ago. And he said Derrick Henry, not a good pass catcher, and that skill translated to the NFL. But he said, give this guy the ball in space and look out. He's like a linebacker trying to bring him down. Geek, Derrick Henry in DFS, especially in the non-PPR sites?
Yeah, they're going to have to, if John is right and this game is going to stay close, and if the lines makers and the odds makers and the handicappers are right, and this is a -4 total, the only way that I really see Tennessee hanging around is with a healthy dose of Derrick Henry, both controlling the clock and also scoring his traditional tutty that he likes to score every single game. So I have a feeling that Henry will be one of the higher scores a touchdown props for the week, just across the board of all the running backs because he will always be in there when they're anywhere near the goal line for Tennessee if they can get there. And this Atlanta defense just not that good. So I even think the Tennessee offense, the passing offense, can get enough going to sort of A, open things up for Henry, and also B, get close enough to the goal line for him to do what he do. So yeah, I'm interested in Henry. Certainly always a little sketchy on the PPR sites. John, do you play a lot of these types on the PPR sites knowing that you really need probably 100 yards and a touchdown to make value?
Define what you mean by a lot. It's just a matter of the way I always look at it is over market, under market. So I try to figure out where the market is at. It's going to be game specific, but yeah, I tend to be over the market on those type of players.
Yeah, and I'll cover what over and under the market is on my tutorial this week that I do for setting up the optimizer. I don't want to get too deep into that on this one, but yes, I totally get what you're saying there, and that is a great way to look at it. But looking back at this game, so everything's in play for me here. Even the wide, I mean, I wish that Tennessee had some like wide receivers that I was ever interested in. I generally don't like their group, so tough to play any of them. But if they did, I would have been interested. But I like Derrick Henry on the Tennessee side. And for Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, I think that one of my philosophies in DFS overall is always have some Matt Ryan to Julio Jones stacks, just in case, it's that week where it goes bananas.
He's starting to throw to him in the red zone now. What happened?
The guy, he figured it out.
Yeah, well, the last 8 games of last season that started. So he went the first 8 games with, I don't think he had a touchdown, and then he had one in almost every game. So that's one trend we like in season long too, is we look at the last quarter to last half season, and we try to see what actual numbers defy the narratives, and those are the guys that we hop on. The Josh Allen was QB1 over the last month of the season in fantasy. In fact, he was the first overall player, and he was underpriced. So the Geek was high on Josh Allen in fantasy this year for good reason. He has paid off at his 12th round ADP. Moving along to New England as at Buffalo. Interesting game. Buffalo, a tough defense, touchdown at home. Is this just play New England every time and you're going to, Bill Belichick 60% against the spread type of thing, John?
I think you're either on the Patriots or you're not on this game, and the public is absolutely hammering the Patriots. You're getting about 80% of the tickets and 90% of the money right now on the Patriots, and I agree with them on this one. Buffalo 3-0, not quite as good as the public thinks, or at least as the 3-0 might say. New England's defense has been absolutely insane. You talk about going back to last year. Well, go back to the end of last year, go through the playoffs and the Super Bowl, and then what they've done this year. It's been pretty impressive. And the points that they gave up last week were not the defense's fault.
Yeah, it's like but New England's not going to go 16-0. I mean, if anyone wants to take a wager with me, they're not going to go. I mean, of course they could. They're going to lose. This feels like a game that could in Buffalo. Maybe
absolutely.
Yeah, it could. Right. So that's why, especially when we talk Survivor. Do you play Survivor, John?
I do. Yes. Yeah. I play quite a number of Survivor entries. Yeah. This is one where you got to figure most people don't even have New England left anymore.
Correct.
So,
well, there are a lot of saved New England people. And then, it would be obviously a huge mistake to take them on the road in Buffalo. But yeah, we love Survivor. It's one of our favorite games.
If I can make a note on Survivor pools, okay. People, so you mentioned on the road. I've a couple of misnomers like road and divisional. I don't want to take that team. It's a divisional road game or something like that. Bottom line is the point spread is the gospel. Okay.
It's all baked in, right? It's all baked in.
It's baked in. So a 7-point favorite at home wins just as often as a 7-point favorite on the road.
Right? Is it a bad? I'm using a strategy in Survivor this year that I haven't used before. I just follow Miami. Wherever they go, it's burning me right now not doing that. We'll see how we end up in the year. I had about 30 different entries in Survivor pools, and in doing that, I do a lot. I try to diversify a little bit, and the diversification has not worked because none of these big favorites have lost yet. So usually works. It's a good strategy because inevitably these big favorites lose, but we haven't seen 3 touchdown favorites in every single week like we have this year. So
yeah, it's been unbelievable.
More than one of them, which is what makes it.
We've had 3 so far. It's crazy, and you're going to get a lot more here with Miami. That's for sure.
If I was to describe, someone asked me to describe Survivor so far, it's been like the year of chalk through the first 3 weeks. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It was almost impossible to fade the chalk, even with the pot, with the pot equity you could have gotten because the teams were split everywhere. Yeah, Geek, you sold me a lemon in our Dynasty League with Sony Michel. Is there a chance? I mean, is Rex Burkhead a viable DFS play now? Because he's involved in both the passing aspect and the running aspect with New England. I know it's like a 3 or 4 headed monster over there. And you don't want to do Patriot games with running backs in DFS. Is there an advantage to be had there?
No. With James White coming back, that cuts Burkhead's workload down. But you see what the Patriots do. They're very, very volatile with the way they use their running backs. It's very game plan specific. We knew last week it was a great spot for Burkhead because Sony Michel was out. And so that gave him those touches as well. But even with that, I mean, he only had 11 carries. It was a lot of work in the passing game. He scored the touchdown. So that's what really made Burkhead's day look good. But at some point, I think the pendulum will swing back to Sony Michel. Not this week, and I'm not touching him at all.
Their fullback is out this week as well, isn't he?
He went on IR. He's out for the year.
Yeah. So I think that's going to affect the running game quite a little bit as well.
I think the Patriots have realized, and this was a mistake in sort of developing this guy in Michel, who they kind of have him as a guy who never catches passes. I think that's a mistake for a versatile team in general, and I think that style of running back is really troubling. You want to give, or at least give the implication that you could throw to a guy, and so the opposing defenses don't understand that there's this tendency, okay, so this guy's in, they're definitely going to run it. Like when you start to show a tendency like that, it really harms your ability to run your offense. And we saw it in the playoffs last year with the Patriots, how they started to come to that realization, I believe, mid-game. I don't remember if it was the Super Bowl or one of the games where they sort of just mid-game just completely shifted off of Sony Michel. I think it was the second week and just went all Burkhead and White because they realized the opposing team was figuring out what they were doing if they ran Sony Michel out there. So with Burkhead, they could run and they also were figuring out what they were doing when they ran James White out there. So it was Burkhead who was the versatile, I can do both things guy, and they really wanted to do that. Now, just to jump over to this game real quick in terms of DFS. So this is at Buffalo. The Patriots defense is elite in the cornerback play, first and foremost. I mean, this is not the week to get back on the Sheriff John Brown. I mean, he's going to be covered by an elite corner, whoever is on him. It's not a good situation if it's Stephon Gilmore or whatever. So not loving that situation. Could Allen do some work with his legs in this one? Can he toss a bomb to some unknown name, a Zay Jones or something like that? Anything can happen, but this just feels like a stinker from a DFS perspective for me across the board. I don't know what the deal is with the wide receiver Edelman. He's got a Q tag. They're saying he's going to play. If he was out, I'd be more interested in like Brown or Dorsett, who's now priced up, but or Josh Gordon. Maybe it's the Josh Gordon week, but it's hard to
Dorsett. Philip Dorsett's priced up now. You know what I like about him is that he has Tom Brady's trust, and as we've seen in the past, if Tom Brady trusts you, that's a good thing. They actually look for him in the red zone. They look for him in the end zone there. I really like Philip Dorsett, but if he's priced up now, I guess that all the value has been squeezed out.
It's going to be tough to find value in any of these Patriots wide receivers because they spread it around a little bit. And like I said, Dorsett was that cheap guy who could go off, and now he's priced like any other wide receiver too. Same price as like basically any other wide receiver too. And at that point, it's much less attractive for me.
All right, yeah. And how about just a yes or no? Frank Gore viable?
No, not for me. Not at all.
Okay. I mean, he came through last week. He was our big flex play. Obviously, a different game script, and they're going to have to pay. How about TJ Yeldon? Will they have to throw a little bit? TJ Yeldon?
Oh, no? Goodness, no. Never.
Okay. All right. Never. All right. There was just a quick question there. All right. Carolina, Camless, now with Kyle Allen, who I liked quite a bit last week. He definitely paid off for fantasy. They're going to go visit Houston, who's a 5-point favorite at home. Where's all the money going on this one? Give me some of the betting angles for this.
Yeah, the money's actually pretty even, and the tickets are pretty even on this game. So no one could figure this game out from the way it's looking right now in the betting markets. But just a little bit, maybe a little bit more on the tickets on Houston, and then a little bit more money on Carolina. I have nothing on this game myself. There's no way my model's going to like this game. Last week we had Carolina, which was a nice win. And I said in the write-up, for those of you on DFS Army who go over to Beat the Book, I'll usually do a write-up every week. And I thought the market was actually was overselling Kyle Allen, only because I think Cam, and I think we realize that now, Cam just wasn't healthy. So an unhealthy Cam versus an Allen, the differential was minimal. They were pricing it as a healthy Cam against Allen. And I thought the market was just totally wrong on that Carolina game, and we were right. So yeah, for betting purposes, I don't like this game at all.
Yeah, Kyle Allen, I mean, it's been, it's been a prominent story on Twitter. He actually beat out Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray left to go to another school to start. I thought Kyle Allen's pretty good. I mean, for an undrafted or a 7th-round pick, whatever he was there, I think he can keep this offense functional, which is what I do like about him. Geek, for DFS, I mean, I was really nervous about my investment in the wide receivers in Carolina. Do you have a little more confidence now that you saw that Kyle Allen can keep them relevant?
I think Kyle Allen is probably a better quarterback, even from what I saw last week, than what Cam has been, at least for the last, 6 or 8 games that I've been watching Cam Newton going back to last season. Either them being with the issues with the shoulder or just the general Cam's not that good at throwing the football accurately issues. And I have an issue with any player who spends more time selecting his outfits and his head schmata than he does actually concentrating on the football games themselves or having any shame when he plays terribly. So that being said, the biggest question for this game for me, and I think for the entire week of DFS, it actually comes back to Christian McCaffrey, who is the only real stud, I would say, running back on the slate, at least a playable one in some sense, with Dalvin Cook in a very, very tough spot at Chicago. And, can we trust Christian McCaffrey against on the road with, the rookie running back against a very, very tough Houston defense that did limit Austin Eckler last week to, kind of a pretty mediocre game. So we learned last week, it's a little sketchy to take and pay up for these running backs in essentially bad spots. And I'd like your take on this, John. I mean, what do you do in a situation like this with a Christian McCaffrey? He looks so tempting. He's the only real pay up option that I think is viable coming off a great week, but this is not the best matchup in the world.
Yeah, my projections actually have Carolina with a total of 102 yards rushing in this game. It's kind of low. And that's a total rushing number. So McCaffrey, I think last week he was my highest owned guy at any position. And this week I'm going to definitely be under the market on McCaffrey.
Yeah. Just to add like a season-long note, it's like in a dynasty league or in a season-long draft, McCaffrey, I mean, though I saw some people taking him at 1.1. I was all Barkley. That has been proven to be the smarter pick because not only does he get you the fantasy production, this guy's never even on the injury report. Barkley is, I mean, obviously he's hurt. He's out for a couple of months. You can't predict that, but I don't know. It's like Zeke, McCaffrey, they're just never even you never even worry about those guys.
Now, I was worried about his size. But he came in pretty jacked up this year, but he's still a small guy. So I worry about the how long he's going and the resiliency that he'll show. But it's so far so good with McCaffrey, that's for sure.
Sometimes those small, compact guys, they don't take the kind of shots. Like Maurice Jones-Drew, he was built like a bowling ball, and he never took those big shots that some of those upright backs took.
Yeah,
that's true.
Coming back to this game from a passing game perspective, I think it's finally time we can get back onto Deshaun Watson. He's had a couple of brutal matchups, at the Chargers even, and he did amazing in that matchup, which looked bad on paper. But the Jacksonville game, not a great game to target quarterbacks. But this is a much more attractive matchup. We saw Kyler Murray put up a lot of fantasy points last week, even in an inefficient performance with Houston at home. That's the real way to attack this game. You got to like DeAndre Hopkins in this spot. He's priced up all the way in the Julio Jones level, which isn't spectacular. But you have, Will Fuller, who hasn't quite had his breakout game yet. Did all right last week, but still kind of waiting for that, touchdown, I guess, from him and that high number of targets game. Kenny Stills getting a little bit of action, although his price is not super attractive for me. And I think Kenny Stills is kind of eaten from the Will Fuller basket right now. And on the flip side, I think the guy who's interesting, Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore are both going to be interesting for me from the Carolina side. So I like the passing games. Passing side of these teams. And I'll throw this one to you. I mean, Carlos Hyde, my boy, you were a big Duke Johnson guy. I said Carlos Hyde probably going to take. Is this too much of a split to even mess with?
Yeah, and it's about to get worse. So, I was wrong on Duke Johnson. I thought he would get 150 carries and all the passing down work. Then they added Carlos Hyde, who's just kind of been mostly a slug. And all the reports today said there's a chance they're going to sign C.J. Anderson too. So this is just, this is a disaster for fantasy. So I'm staying off the Houston running backs. You're only playing season long. You're only playing Duke Johnson in an absolute emergency if you've suffered some running back carnage.
I never liked the Houston running back generic term, regardless of who's been back there. And again, this goes back to a lot of what I talk about. Certain teams produce points from the running back position, regardless of who's there, and other teams just don't. And that's my fear, really, again, with Gall. I'm going to use some Gallman this week because you told me he's a competent player. But that is my fear with the Giants as well. They have not been a team outside of the skill set of Saquon Barkley sort of superseding their whatever it is about their offense that doesn't produce points to the running back position. So but I'm kind of going with a different quarterback. Maybe we'll see a different result, kind of, hope and prayer.
Their line is better than it has been, the Giants. So that's the only hope there. They have improved, and Eli makes them look worse because he just can't move. So
right, and a mobile quarterback is always going to help the running back. I mean, that's
no doubt.
Yeah.
And this game that we're talking about, though, I think Houston actually is going to be able to run the ball fairly well. The question is, of course, who gets all those points. So if it's a split, are they really worth it? But I think they're going to get a lot of rushing yardage. The problem is, it's not going to be just one guy.
Yeah, is it enough to get me 20 plus points
right.
in DFS? And you just can't see Carlos Hyde outside of like a miracle.
Hyde is terrible. Yeah. Carlos Hyde is terrible.
Yeah, he needs 2 touchdowns. He needs a Mark Ingram like craziness, like 2 goal line plunges. It could happen. We've seen it. I once saw the dude Cameron Artis-Payne from Carolina as the backup quarterback get 2 touchdowns in I think it was a Monday night or some primetime game, and I was like, oh, okay, Cameron Artis-Payne. But it can happen, but don't expect it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, I'm going to put a few bucks on Miami at plus 16 at home. I don't know who the hell the Chargers are to think that they can give up more than 2 touchdowns on the road. Are you kidding me? I thought this was going to be closer to like 12.5, maybe 10.5. 16's too many. I'm not going to go crazy, but just for fun, I'm going to put a little bit down. What do your numbers say?
So for years on, I've had clients of mine who've argued with me, like when the Colts were terrible before pre-luck, and I would always have the Colts because my system generally has a lot of bad teams. And people would argue with me that the Colts were giving up. And I just refuse to believe any NFL team ever gives up. Like, these guys don't go out there and just give up. And I've been hesitant with Miami. This is the first team that I think might have possibly given up. I actually had them as a trigger last week, did not play them. But this week, I'm going to agree with you. I have them. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to play them. There's like bells all over the place on my model that say Miami's the play this week. It's the biggest play if I strictly listen to the model. And as I'm looking at the money is actually pouring in on Miami. So that tells me that the sharp guys are on Miami as well. It's a lot of points in an NFL game, and this Charger team is not good enough to warrant laying that much wood.
Geek, I know it's easy to say stay away from everybody on Miami, but rookie Preston Williams, man, with his 12 targets last week and Josh Rosen there. I mean, he only caught 4 of his 12 last week, Williams, but he's a player that I certainly liked in the preseason. And, his draft stock dropped way down because of some off the field stuff. This guy's like a 2nd-round receiver on a bad team. If guys are going to get double-digit targets, we got to play them, right? Geek, you're on mute, just to let you know, okay? So I'll cue you again. If guys are going to get, I'll cue you again. Ready? If guys are going to get double-digit targets, we're going to play them, right?
Okay, we are absolutely going to play. All right, so I want to reflect this back to also something that John just said. So what is the fear in this game? We've seen what happened last week with the Cowboys where they start to kind of pull ahead. It's a smash spot. Miami played competently at the very beginning of the game. And so it looked like, they're going to try to make a game of this. They brought a new quarterback in Josh Rosen, who is a prideful person, if nothing else. And so, no, it wasn't a quit job. And if they were keeping the game close, wow, Zeke goes off and a lot of these other weapons potentially do even better for the Cowboys. So if we think that Miami can keep this game close, or at least keep it within the 16, if they can if the sharp bettors are kind of betting that, all right, Miami is going to actually, play with some pride, with some confidence. They're at home. Again, you have a West Coast team traveling all the way east in a game where they're like, we don't give a fuck. We're going to smash these dudes, right? They're not coming in like psyched up for the kill, but they're coming in like, oh yeah, we got this. No worries. They play a little soft. Miami comes out. They keep the game close. That just spells fantasy point production across the board in this game. So, it makes me like Keenan Allen maybe a smidge more. I definitely like Preston Williams, who's done well at his super cheap price, regardless of the terrible matchups he's been in to start the season so far. Sure, not super efficient last week, but again, that was against a very good Dallas defense. And while this Chargers defense is also very good, they're traveling west. Again, it's a tough game. They're tired. They're coming out there like, this is a smash spot. They're not even psyched for it. I'd love to think that somebody like Kenyon Drake could have a good game here. And if he's on your season-long team and you're trying to replace Le'Veon Bell or some of these guys that are on bye this week, I think he's startable and playable here, not getting a whole lot of use. But at some point, this Miami offense does have to realize that Kylan Balaj is trash. And so I just like all of the fantasy pieces in this game in the sort of narrative, like you said, of where Miami could potentially cover the spread, keep it to within 10 points, and everybody's playing for both teams start to finish. And even if it doesn't go that way, I think your pass catchers and the Miami side, you kind of have to a little bit be interested in these guys. No one's going to be on them. Preston Williams, even Devontae Parker. You don't know which guy it's going to be, but I do think there's value here from a low ownership and also from a game theory perspective and also from a sports betting perspective in terms of assuming that these Dolphins have a good chance to cover the spread at home.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And what's going to be interesting is if and when, I don't think if, Melvin Gordon comes back, what that's going to do to the LA Chargers side of things and Austin Eckler. So in season long, I'm holding on to Austin Eckler, just enjoying the ride. I'm not really trading him because, chances are you don't have many better options.
Let me throw this out there before we go, because I want to ask John this question again. I love that we have John here because
great.
The way you look at some of these games and exposures is fantastic. So Austin Eckler is that other name that's going to be popping on DFS minds as, oh, this is kind of an elite running back in an elite spot. But, oh, my gosh, I got burned by Zeke Elliott last week in the same situation. Is it a Eckler-Jackson sort of situation where we want to maybe get some exposure to Jackson? Are you scared of Eckler? They're going to rest him or not give him enough touches in this game to justify the high salary? Do you want to go over or under the field here?
I am probably going to be pretty close to the market on this. And I think I don't think you should be afraid of it. All right. I mean, they're going to score and they're going to run the ball. I mean, at the end of the day, it is still a 16.5 point line. So even if this is a 10 to 14 point game and we're right that Miami keeps it close enough, we still, if we were looking at this as a 7-point game, we'd be like, okay, well, the Chargers are going to be out there, running the ball in the fourth quarter up 14. Okay, well, Miami's going to be the right bet at a 14-point game, but yet the Chargers are going to be pounding the ball here in the fourth quarter. So I wouldn't be too afraid here of Eckler in this game, but it's a possibility I'm going to be under the market just because everyone's going to want to hammer these running backs against the Chargers, and maybe people get a little bit afraid because Pollard came in last week and got 100 yards himself and took away from Zeke. So that's a possibility.
I think that's going to be the market fear is, oh my gosh, I paid up for Zeke last week. And then they were up so much that they gave it to the backup. So I'm afraid to pay again for Eckler this week because what if the Chargers are up by 21 in the first quarter and all of a sudden they just start throwing Jackson out there and he gets 110 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Eckler winds up with the crappy game.
Yeah, my hope is people get off of Eckler. Okay. Because then I'll be over the market. Because in my mind, and I haven't looked at it close yet, I'll start looking more on the weekend, but I'm not changing the way I'm going to play this. And where I am in relation to the market is really going to be determined by the market if they overreact or not.
And let me describe real quick, and I know we have a hard stop, so hopefully we don't have too many games left, but I'll describe real quick. When you say the market, one of the things we do is we produce ownership projections for all of these games. They get updated throughout the week. So as you're creating your lineups and you're looking at your exposure to these guys, you compare it to the ownership projection for the player. and you could, or Eckler's projected for 33. So then you can make your decision using the optimizer. For example, do I want to bring him up to 55 and kind of be overexposed to this guy, or do I want to kind of take him down to 15% or 20% and be underexposed to a guy, rather than saying I'm not using him or I am going all in? There, you can compare your exposures against the market or the ownership projection. All right, we'll continue.
Eckler doesn't strike me as a guy that they want to put in a glass case like they do Zeke. So I think they're just going to use him. Chargers need to rack up wins. They're in a tough division. I think it's a totally different situation. So
agreed.
Yeah, use Eckler as needed. See, 2 more games. Let's try to knock these out in 3 minutes each, so you can do a nice close here. Seattle, who I thought was a good team, I was wrong. On the road, certainly doesn't have that amazing home field advantage going to Arizona. Again, I just from the eye test, I'm not using any numbers or spreadsheets for this one. I like Arizona in the points, even though Cliff Kingsbury has been a little nutless when he gets in the red zone, likes to kick the field goal instead of going for the optimal 4th down red zone touchdowns. Does that affect the betting line that Kingsbury has not been an aggressive coach at this point?
It's going to affect the total quite a bit. Possibly. I don't think it has yet. We'll see until he gets a little bit more of a track record. Quickly on the game, the money is pouring in on Seattle, by the way. The tickets and the money. So the public's all over this. I'm not sure if the sharps are on this game at all. I possibly may have Seattle. I have to delve into it a little bit more, and those guys over at Beat the Book will find out when I post that. But yeah, the under is some. I don't play a lot of totals, but I did have something in one of my models trigger that this game might be a likely under. So that could be interesting from a DFS standpoint, only because it's one of the higher projected totals of the day. So,
this is okay. So you could see a shootout. I mean, Russell.
No,
Wilson,
I could see it go. I could actually see this game going lower than what they're projecting it in Vegas. So
yeah, and it's always an interesting Geek in Arizona to find out who the wide receiver of choice has been. Is it going to be Grandpa Fitzgerald again? I mean, he seems to be he looks just as good as he ever has. I mean, he can't be an exciting DFS play, but it seems like one that pays off each week. I mean, which one of these wide receivers do you like the best game in and game out for Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, what's the difference? They're throwing 40 to 50 times a week, and so everybody's getting volume here. I love Larry Fitzgerald. I love Christian Kirk. I don't mind paying down for some of the other guys. And I know this game potentially could play to the under for various reasons, but I don't think that's going to harm even Demir Bird, still getting plenty of targets every week. Keyshawn Johnson, they just got rid of Michael Crabtree, so one less mouth to feed over there. But I have to say, I like this game a lot. From a fantasy points perspective, because I love the speed that Arizona. I want to attack Arizona every single week on both sides of the field. So I want to attack with Russell Wilson. I also want to bring it back with the offensive skill position players for Arizona. I think that Kyler Murray is improving every single week. He's a rookie, but I just love how much they throw. I think there's a cheat code going on here that the market hasn't picked up on yet. 43 attempts this week, 40 the week before, 54 the week before that. They're going to throw and throw and throw. So these pass catchers are going to prosper regardless of if the team is ahead, if they're behind, no matter what the hell's happening. And the other beautiful thing that's happening is they're playing so fast that they get extra reps, the opponent gets extra reps. It's just a fantasy points bonanza. So I was all over the game last week. It didn't quite lead to a tournament win because Jones and the Giants game and all of that, and also Russell Wilson and his game went off to the point where all the other kind of quarterback combinations were negated last week. But I'm going back to Arizona, going to hang in Scottsdale with the retired folk for a little bit. And then I'm going to get involved with this game again. I want Russell Wilson. I want Kyler Murray. I want everything to do with both sides of this game.
And Disley.
Yeah.
Will Disley. Oh, fucking Will Disley. I might be under on him if he's going to be chalk.
Because I think a lot of people are going to have him this week. Arizona's been getting killed by the tight ends.
I know. It just feels like the spot to maybe be a little below
to
mark.
be under. I'm probably going to be under. Everyone's going to be all over it.
I know. I'm going to be a little under on that one too, I think. But my sneaky one is, how about the Chris Carson burn from last week? Can we go back to him?
He's on the ropes, man. I know Happy Face Pete Carroll is saying, "Oh, he's our guy." But the one thing in the NFL they'll get you sat on the bench for some reason is fumbling, and now it's almost every game at this point. I always found it funny that like wide receivers that fumble don't get punished by the coach, but running backs do. My favorite pickup in Dynasty has been CJ Prosise since Rashad Penny's been hurt. But John, what do you think about the fumbling issue of Chris Carson?
I've got Carson, and he was one of my keepers in one of my leagues, so I'm hoping he plays. But I'm going to agree with you here. I don't like Carson now, and this is a game where I see running. I think Seattle rushes. I think it's one of my outside of Baltimore. I've got this as the second best rushing team projections this week. So
who? Who?
Well, that's the problem. That's the problem.
DJ Prosise, baby.
Yeah. No, it could very well be. I think we might be done seeing Carson. Carson might not be the guy this week. I'm gonna have to bench him.
Don't tell me I'm telling you, man. He looked good in his limited carries. He's only 25 years old.
I like Prosise.
Yeah, no, I see Kevin there shaking his head. No, it could be the CJ swindle. Just be careful.
There is some fear here. This is definitely a scary scenario, but let's wait for some coach speak by the liar in chief himself. Not Donnie T. We're talking about Pete Carroll, a liar.
I think he was getting he was coaching with a concussion. You saw the clip, right? Of getting hit in the face with the ball pregame.
he lies. Yeah.
Never
believe Pete Carroll. He is the lyingest of them all.
Do you remember when he was the Jets coach? Oh, that was
why did they fire him? Like
when he gave the choke.
Yeah. Well, I think he was replacing Rich Kotite. Was that like the string of bad coaches, or was it?
No, he was the replacement for. Was he the one who came in when they were supposed to get Belichick?
No.
Who was that?
Belichick. He replaced this dude who came originally from the Bengals. He was the defensive coordinator.
Oh! I got his yes. I could see his face, and I can't remember the name.
Yes, I cannot remember the name, but he was the defensive coordinator. They elevated him. He had an 8-8 season, which, as a Jets fan, was the best season I had ever seen the Jets have to that point in my life. And they're like, "Oh, you're fired." What? Then they brought in Richie Kotite to replace him. Oh, Jets!
All right, your boy season long says has got to bang through this last one quick. I'm going to go referee a little high school basketball game in about 45 minutes. So let's talk about Minnesota going to Chicago. The Chicago's offense. It's been said way too many times. The Bears traded up for Trubisky in a draft where Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. That's been a narrative beat to death. This is just a divisional. It's going to be an ugly game. I like Minnesota if I'm getting points, but I don't have a real heavy lean. What's your betting angle on this one, John?
Yeah, I don't have a heavy lean on this game either. My numbers have this game, as you might expect, being extremely low scoring. I've got the number at like 2, and I think the market right now or the Vegas line is 3. The money, curiously, has been coming in pretty heavy on Minnesota, both the tickets and the money. So it's about 70% of the money right now is on Minnesota. And I think the line is actually, I'm looking at it now, is down to 2.5. So it went from 3 to 2.5. So I think they're I think they're right on the market on this line. But no lean for me either way. Just a low scoring game. Not sure if it's got a lot of DFS interest other than the defenses here.
Geek, you and I talked about Dalvin Cook is in Dynasty is still gettable for some reason, but we agree he belongs in the elite tier of backs. If there was a Dynasty startup draft, we believe that he would go in the top 4. We would take him in the top 4 picks, even ahead of at this point. Barkley's looking a little delicate, but Dalvin is too, so we would take him in the top 5 picks. Is he an every week play, even at his price?
In season long, absolutely. But as far as a DFS play, no, we can't pay up for guys that are in difficult spots where I need a massive game from him at 8K and he doesn't deliver it. So what that essentially means is, no, will I be targeting in a 38-point game total, the second most expensive running back on the slate across the board, on the road at Chicago? Absolutely not. Can you play it as a tournament contrarian, I'm getting silly with it kind of like thing. Sure. But even then, for the guy at 8.3K to pay off, he doesn't just have to have a decent game. He has to have a smash game, which we've seen happen in existence once with David Johnson going up to the Vikings in a tough matchup and having a 30-point game. But the fact that I can remember that happened 3 seasons ago and it's still burned in my memory, like it doesn't happen that often. So no, I mean, I'll ask you this as well, John. But for me, Dalvin Cook, the only real piece that would even be a sniff in this particular game, and I don't like it.
No, if you're someone who plays a minimal amount of lineups in these big GPPs, that's not where you want to be contrarian, because he's still going to be owned high enough where you're not getting the benefit from it. I'm going to have a few shares of it because, playing 150 lineups, I will, but I'm going to agree with you on this. If I'm playing 1, 5, 10 lineups, something like that, you don't want to have any of anyone in this game, and Cook is not the right contrarian play.
Hey, Geek, let's in the next 30 seconds or under, tell me where the fantasy value on Chicago is, and don't tell me Taylor Gabriel.
Chicago. You can go back to Allen Robinson if you want, but I mean, he's going to have tough coverage. There's really nothing going on the Chicago side that I'm interested in. If I thought that they were kind of going to play Tariq Cohen the way they normally do, this feels like a Tariq Cohen out of the backfield type of a game where he does a little something unexpected out of nowhere and wins you $1 million. So if I was forced to play somebody from the Chicago team across the board, it's Tariq Cohen, because are you really going to smash Montgomery up the middle against the Vikings? No, probably not. It's probably not going to work. None of the wide receivers, again, I'm not going to Taylor Gabriel after that ridiculous game. I think that Allen Robinson is going to be covered by Xavier Rhodes. Not a great spot to be targeting a guy like that. So really, there's a whole lot of nothing here, except if you forced me gun to my head, I'd say Tariq Cohen has an outside shot of getting a little extra usage in this game, and his salary isn't so difficult to afford here.
Yeah, I really like watching David Montgomery play. He's hard to bring down. He runs really hard. I mean, there's a couple guys in the NFL, they're just impossible to bring down. Alvin Kamara is one of them. Like, you see him get hit. Unless you wrap that guy, he doesn't go down. Josh Allen is almost impossible to tackle. And I think David Montgomery, even though he's slow by NFL standards, I do like him as an NFL player. I'm still out, thinking about if he's going to be a good fantasy player for years to come, to be determined. Yeah, that wraps up our Vegas lines portion. Great job. It was great having John on the cast, right? I mean, what a great addition.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Super awesome. And let me just tell the folks where they can find us. So if you're listening to this and you're not currently a DFS Army subscriber and you're into daily fantasy sports, it's a time to check it out. Go to dfsarmy.com. We got a special promo code in honor of our millionaire, our first ever fantasy millionaire, Bobby Wow. So the promo code is Bobby Wow. So if you use that code on dfsarmy.com to sign up as a VIP, you get 20% off your VIP membership. VIP is $49.99 a month. After the 20% off Bobby Wow discount, you're locked in at $39.99 a month, which, as you know, John, and says, we are priced well below any other site at not even close. If you want to optimize our projections, chat, picks from pros, all of that stuff in one place. No one is delivering what we deliver. Our optimizer is proven. It won $1 million this past week. It will continue to do things like that with our new system that we put in play this year, which is unmatched in the industry. And I'll also mention DFS Army's handicap serving Beat the Bookie, where you can get picks from John Alesia himself. He amongst the rest of our crew, of course, Ryan and the rest of the crew, we do model bets. We do standard, handicapping bets, certainly against the spread and all that good stuff, implied probabilities, all the sharp numbers that you need in one spot. There's a chat just like we do in DFS Army. In Beat the Bookie, they're teaching new sports gamblers sort of the ropes as well, and that's kind of setting us apart, I think, a little bit, just like we do in DFS Army from other sites where they just kind of want to either give you lineups or give you picks. We're focused on the process itself. So go to dfsarmy.com, click on Beat the Bookie, and sign up as a Beat the Bookie subscriber. If you're into sports gambling, if you're into DFS, sign up as DFS Army as a VIP. And if you want to do both, we got a nice discount going for that as well. So get in there. We hope to see you. We hope to help you win some money.
All right, guys. Until next time, for John, we'll call him John the Bookie.
You can call me whatever you want.
No, but you were really great, and thank you for
Statsational. Yeah.
Statsational. I look forward to reading your stuff on the site and following you. And of course, you got the Geek, our Godfather in Chief, and I am Season Long Sez. Check me out on the Slack channel for Season Long Fantasy. All right, guys. Till next time.
Take care.